Gang, what's up? Aaron here, Kennedy and Looney. It's a busy day in the House of Commons. Many things go on outside of question period that they're not aware of. You might not be aware. They don't put it on the news. I show it here. These are some of the best clips of the things that happened in the House of Commons today. Question period is a pageant. We like to cover that. It's fun, but it is a load of it's crap. These things that happen outside the legacy media, other things happen. We've got to take a look. Check this out. This goes down all day, every day in the House of Commons when they're in session. Let's look.
In comparison, just 25 years ago, less than 7% of those who voted before Election Day. This ongoing trend shows a deep and lasting evolution in Canadians' voting behavior and service expectations. It also puts enormous pressure on our infrastructure and in particular on our returning officers. Any election is a major logistical undertaking and requires the coordinated efforts of an extraordinary number of people over an immense territory. It is done without any permanent infrastructure during a very short period and based on a calendar that is unknown ahead of time. In a snap election context with only 36 days, the ability of returning officers to secure polling sites, to recruit a sufficient number of poll workers, not just overall, but in each and every community, and to offer a range of special voting services may have reached its limit. In some cases, these pressures may have also contributed to some of the issues we experienced with special ballot voting in a few electoral districts that I mentioned in my report. We are currently reviewing special ballot training, control mechanisms, and processes to minimize the risk of errors, and we will implement changes in the coming months as we prepare for the next election. But it is important to also examine how we can adapt to the evolving needs and service expectations of Canadians, not just for the next election, but for future ones as well. As I indicated in my 2022 recommendations report, outside of a fixed date election context, a short 36-day campaign may not be sufficient to meet those evolving service needs. Increasing early voting services, whether by adding advanced polling days as was contemplated in the last Parliament, or simply increasing service points within the same 4 advanced polling days as we did in this election, requires more lead time. We've also been testing electronic lists of electors in by-elections and will continue to do so in order to modernize our processes and make them more efficient and flexible. But the introduction of technology at the polls to serve electors, even as we maintain our paper ballot, needs to be gradual and prudent. To conclude, Mr. Chair, Canada has a strong electoral process built on gradual change and adaptation. My report, as was the case with previous reports, is an opportunity to reflect on what adjustments are necessary to meet the evolving expectations of Canadians. Et ça va me faire plaisir de répondre aux questions des membres du...
Thank you, Mr. Roussel. Good to see both of you back in committee. I'm going to ask Mr. Perreault you some questions about the so-called longest ballot committee, which you reference in your report. In the last election, this group targeted the Carleton riding, although prior to the last election, they targeted several by-elections and then later targeted the Battle River Crowfoot riding in the recent by-election with a total of 91 candidates in Carleton, a record 203 candidates in Battle River Crowfoot. Would you agree, broadly speaking, that the committee's tactic to flood the ballot with an endless list of candidates had a overall disruptive and negative impact on the electoral process in Carleton, in the prior by-elections, and in Battle River Crowfoot?
Certainly it did have such an impact, and it was a challenge for a number of voters, especially those with disabilities, to be able to cast their ballot with such a long list of electors. And that is why, Mr. Chair, I've come to this committee in the past and recommended some changes to make sure that this can be addressed.
And just to sort of flesh out some of the challenges that this committee created, you referred to voters with disabilities. That would include voters with visual impairments, mobility issues, literacy challenges. Would that be correct?
That would As well, voters with dexterity to handle such a large ballot. People who are physically impaired, who have limitations, would also face a challenge.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
1,600. 1,600, Mr. Speaker. That is the number of crimes that happen in this country every single day. That's almost one crime per minute. And these aren't statistics. These are innocent people hit over the head with baseball bats. Their jewelry stores smashed in by an incoming automobile that then is used to open up and steal the proceeds that families have spent their entire lives earning. It's the people who wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of stomping feet in their living room floor as home invaders break in to steal, rob, pillage, and much worse. It's the Faruqi family, whose courageous father came running out to protect his defenseless children against home invaders and was shot in the throat. It is a 3-year-old girl, mercilessly raped by a chronic repeat offender, a scumbag who had already been convicted of raping a 12-year-old boy, but yet, under Liberal laws, was out on the street. C'est le cas qu'on entend à Saint.
Or, in Saint Jérôme, a woman was killed by her former partner, a partner who had already been arrested 30 times and who had gotten bail 16 times before killing his partner.
Beautiful young mother, Bailey McCourt, murdered by her ex, who was out on bail, and he had only been released 3 hours earlier. He was only 4 kilometers away from the courthouse that granted him that Liberal bail. Now, these are not just sensationalist stories as Liberals like to dismiss them. These are facts. While the Justice Minister condescendingly dismissed these crimes as we are not the Wild West, well, the facts would beg to differ, Mr. Speaker. Under this Liberal government, since they have taken office, violent crime is up 55%. Extortions up 330%. Homicides up 29%. Sexual assaults up 76%. There is a cause and there is effect. We know the source of this crime. It is Liberal bail. Liberal bail as passed into law by Liberal Law C-75. It requires judges to release the accused at the earliest opportunity under the least onerous restrictions. Those are the words embedded in the law. And as a result, the same offenders can commit literally hundreds of offenses and be released often within hours of their latest arrest. Police say that often they're not even finished the paperwork on the arrest and the offender is back out on the street. I've had police officers tell me they've arrested the same offender 3 times in the same day. One police officer in the Toronto area told me that most of the arrests this time, the criminals happily confessed to the crime in the backseat of the car because they actually don't care about getting convicted anymore. They know that Liberal laws will turn them loose regardless of the outcome of the trial. Now, Liberals pulled a bait and switch in order to get elected. In the last election, they knew that Canadians were fed up with Liberal bail. So they said, give us a 4th chance and we'll reverse course. What happened? Well, it's now been 6 months since the Prime Minister was elected on the promise that he would reverse Liberal bail. And where are we? There's not been a single Liberal bill to reverse the bail system that they set up. Not one. We're 6 months in, Mr. Speaker. We all know what needs to happen. The police have basically written the legislative repeal that is necessary for us to fix the Liberal mess. And yet, no bill, nothing, zero, zip, zilch. Maybe it's because the Prime Minister took the unprecedentedly reckless act of appointing Justin Trudeau's most incompetent minister to the job. The now Justice Minister was the immigration minister who literally destroyed the best system in the world, increasing the numbers by 300% over the previous norm, allowing criminals to come into our country unvetted, swamping our housing, job, and health care with too many people too fast. And then he went on to the housing portfolio, where he created the worst housing crisis in the OECD, and now he's in charge of the criminal code. Not compound that problem with the Minister of Public Safety, someone who should resign for having gone ahead with a bill with a plan to confiscate property from law-abiding firearms owners that he was caught on tape saying would not work. This is who we have as the Keystone Cops in charge of reversing the Liberal crime wave of the last decade. Now, some people say we need bail reform. We have bail reform. It's called C-75. What we need is to undo the Liberal bail reform. Hence, today, we are calling for the government to scrap Liberal bail and replace it with jail, not bail. And so today we put forward a motion that would allow Parliament to adopt Bill C-242, the Jail Not Bail Act, put forward by the brilliant Member of Parliament for Oxford, Ontario. This proposal is backed by police, by crime victims, and by everybody who wants to stop crime. And you will hear more from the member for Niagara South, with whom I'm splitting my time on this matter, Mr. Speaker. And I will note that this government doesn't need to do anything. They don't need to do a thing. They just need to get out of the way. If they get out of the way, they've already broken the bail system. They brought in the chaos that we are now experiencing. We're not asking them to put on a cape and come to the rescue. We're asking them to simply get out of the way. If they do one thing, it is this: sit on their hands and let the House of Commons pass this motion to quickly push through the Jail Not Bail Act. We can lock up the criminals that have been terrorizing our streets. That's all we need them to do. In fact, some people say they're doing nothing. It would be great if they did nothing, actually, because nothing would be a massive improvement over what they have been doing, which is they have been doing violence to our criminal code, and our criminal code has allowed criminals to do violence to our people. We need the answer is actually very simple. Liberals, pseudo-intellectuals in liberal circles love to say the problem is much more complicated. It's not a complicated problem, Mr. Speaker. The statistics tell us the extent. We have a very small number of criminals doing a phenomenal amount of crime. The same 40 offenders in Vancouver got arrested 6,000 times. That's 150 arrests per offender per year, and those were just the occasions on which they were caught. Almost all the crime is done by a tiny group of rampant reoffenders. If you keep them in jail, they cannot reoffend. It is very simple. We did this under the previous Conservative government. And one thing happened that was unsurprising, and one that was maybe counterintuitive. The first thing is, unsurprising, crime went down by 25%, plummeted. Biggest drop in crime in modern Canadian history. It worked. The second part was a little bit counterintuitive. You know what else went down? Incarcerations. After Liberals warned that we'd have to build new jails to accommodate all of the prisoners, in fact, fewer people ended up in jail. Why? Because the same offenders who were coming in and going out just stayed behind bars. We already had to reserve them a room, Mr. Speaker. It's like the Hotel California. They check out, but they never really leave. You just keep them in the cell and never let them out, lock them up, throw away the key. But then something else happened. The small-time offenders, or those looking at getting involved in a life of crime, said, hell no. The penalty is too serious. I'm going to go get a job and follow the law. Deterrence works. The facts are in. Liberal bail has brought hell to our streets. And the only one keeping that hell in place is this Prime Minister. He and his government need to get out of the way so Conservatives can scrap Liberal bail, lock up the criminals and throw away the key. And do this not out of vengeance or spite, but out of love for the law-abiding people, so that our children can once again play safely in our streets, so that people can go to bed at night in peace and tranquility, so that when they wake up in the morning, their car is still there, so that we have a safe country where law-abiding people can live good, secure, happy, worry-free lives. That's what we're working for. Will the government get out of the way and let us get it done?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Honourable Member for Brantford-Brant, Six Nations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Always a pleasure to rise on behalf of the great citizens of Brantford, Brant South, Six Nations. It's more particularly poignant for me, given today's topic and given my prior history in the criminal justice system. And I would dare say, Mr. Speaker, that one of the driving forces for me to leave behind, at that point, almost 28 years in the criminal justice system, to become a legislator is because I saw firsthand, daily, the firsthand tragic consequences of the failed soft-on-crime agenda by this Liberal government. Starting in 2015, making the changes in 2019 with Bill C-75, later in 2023 with C-5 and C-83, the cumulative effect is now Canadians are living in a state of fear. Canadians are waking up every single day to reading, seeing, and hearing about one heartbreak story after another, usually someone who has been killed, someone who has been wounded, maimed, injured, had their car stolen, had their home invaded, been subject to sexual assaults, and lo and surprise, we have individuals who are committing these offenses, who are on numerous releases, who are classified by the police services as being well known to them because they are repeat violent offenders. That is the reality that Canada is facing. This was not the reality prior to 2019, Mr. Speaker. In 2019, there was a balance in our criminal justice system where the rights, the constitutional rights of the accused, the right to be presumed innocent, the right to reasonable bail, was balanced evenly with community safety and the safety of victims. We saw more releases and we saw more detention orders, and people had a level of confidence that things were working as they were supposed to. But this government decided in 2019 to lie to Canadians. Justin Trudeau and his former ministers deliberately lying to Canadians by saying,
Order. There are certain words that we do consider unparliamentary, so I would just encourage the member to leave out those words and carry on with his comment.
Misleading Canadians into believing they were simply codifying language from the Supreme Court of Canada. The decision they were referring to, Mr. Speaker, was ANTIC. And ANTIC basically reiterated the principles under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms that apply to people who are factually innocent, although charged with a serious crime. Justin Trudeau and his ministers said they were taking the language from ANTIC and applying that to the criminal code. Well, the decision in ANTIC never directed the federal government to do anything. It was a reminder about the balance that needed to take place every single day in every single courthouse in this country. Justin Trudeau and his then Justice Minister, David Lametti, decided to make it one step easier for criminals. They introduced the principle of restraint under Section 493.1 of the Criminal Code, which then said, regardless of the grounds of detention in the criminal code, the primary ground, are you going to show up for court? The secondary ground, is there a protection issue for the public? Is there a presumption that this person is going to be incurring further charges if released? And the tertiary grounds, to maintain the confidence of the public, depending on the severity of the charge. Those three grounds worked, but Justin Trudeau and David Lametti decided to introduce the principle of restraint. That telegraphed to every judge and every justice of the peace hearing bail applications to this day that they shall, mandatory language, shall release the accused at the earliest opportunity on the least restrictive conditions. Regardless of what the charge was, regardless of the carnage the charge has caused to the community or to the victim, regardless of the offender's criminal record, which may have showed a pattern of breaching court orders or a pattern of committing that same offense again. And then, get this, Mr. Speaker, regardless of the number of outstanding releases that person may be on, that person, according to this Liberal government, was worthy of release. That, Mr. Speaker, is the origin of catch and release. That is the reason we have the problems that exist today. Now, I know the member for Winnipeg North likes to turn everything into a partisan issue. But to my colleague from Woodstock, this particular bill and our arguments are not partisan, because community safety is not a partisan issue. Every member in this House represents constituents, and those constituents want to wake up in their home that is still safe, the windows are still intact, the doors haven't been broken in, that their vehicle is still in the driveway, that their kids can play safely in the backyard, can play street hockey on the streets, and not be hit by stray bullets, or not be invaded at night, as we are seeing constantly, day after day after day. That's what Canadians want. And that's why this is not a partisan issue. The number one responsibility of that Liberal government, Mr. Speaker, is to keep Canadians safe. So despite what the member for Winnipeg North saying, that the Prime Minister has a robust agenda that he's promised Canadians, this is a classic bait and switch. We heard these promises during the election. We heard the promises in the throne speech. We have heard numerous members on that side of the House make promises that it's coming. But here we are, 7 months removed from when this Prime Minister became the new Prime Minister of this country, and we are still waiting. And in that time frame, people are dying, people are fearful, people are being sexually assaulted, people are being extorted at an alarming rate. Just take a look at these statistics, Mr. Speaker. Because of Liberal bail laws, violent crime up 55% since 2015. Firearm crime up 130% because of Liberal bail laws. Because of Liberal bail laws, extortion skyrocketed 330%. Because of Liberal bail laws, sex assaults up 76%. Because of Liberal bail laws, homicides up 29%. So that's why, if they don't want to exercise their number one responsibility, get out of the way. Let us bring forth common sense solutions to protect Canadians. I brought a petition that I was hoping was going to go viral across this country this past July, calling for the immediate repeal of the principle of restraint, restoring safe streets, and applying the principle of community safety, just like the member of Woodstock has done in our Jail Not Bail Act. And you know what, Mr. Speaker? Since the middle of July, 60,000 proud Canadians that those members in the government represent, signed my petition. Because for the last 4 years, this government has heard from premiers, has heard from mayors, has heard from presidents of police associations, has heard from police chiefs, has heard from victim advocacy groups to do one thing: change your approach to bail. Keep Canadians safe. So here's your opportunity to the Liberal government. If you want to clearly distinguish yourself and remove yourself from the Trudeau legacy, here is your opportunity. Stand in support of the Jail Not Bail Act or abstain from the vote. But please telegraph to your constituents, who I'm sure are going to be watching our speeches today, and if they're not, I will certainly share it amongst all my followers across this country, to do your job. Stand up for Canada, stand up for safety, stand up for victims, and put violent criminals where they belong, back in jail. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.